The silence of the void is a lie. Aboard a vessel of the 9th Legion, the silence is actually a choir of 1,000,000 ticking clocks, each one counting down to a disaster no one else can hear. My name is Marius Lauren, and for a decade I was the man who kept the time for a god. I was a remembrancer, a collector of echoes, sent by the iterating machine of the imperial administration to document the unfolding perfection of the Great Crusade. I expected to find a story of conquest written in gold and fire. Instead, I found a tragedy written in the marrow of bones. When I first stepped onto the boarding ramp of the Red Tear, the flagship of the Blood Angels, the sheer sensory violence of it nearly brought me to my knees. It wasn't the smell of incense or the sterile tang of recycled air. It was the beauty. Every bulkhead was etched with scenes of human triumph. Every corridor was a cathedral of marble and crimson silk. I had spent years on the iron-cold ships of the Iron Warriors and the utilitarian slabs of the Ultramarines, but this was different. This was a funeral pyre disguised as a palace. The warriors of the 9th moved with a grace that felt predatory yet mournful, as if they were already grieving for the enemies they had not yet slain. I did not meet Sanguinius in a throne room or a strategium. I found him on my 3rd night in the solarium, a vast vaulted dome of reinforced glass steel that looked out into the churning madness of the warp, protected only by the shimmering veil of the Geller fields. He was standing with his back to me, his massive wings unfurled to their full, staggering span. They weren't just white, they were a shifting spectrum of ivory, silver, and the pale gold of a dying sun. He wasn't wearing his ornate war plate. He was draped in a simple, flowing robe of white linen that made him look less like a general and more like a ghost. "The warp is hungry tonight, Marius," he said. He didn't turn around. His voice had the resonance of a cathedral bell vibrating in my very teeth. It recognizes a storyteller. It wants to know if you have brought a happy ending with you. I stammered, my carefully prepared greetings dissolving into ash. "My lord, I am here to document the truth. The ending is not mine to write." He turned then, and for the first time I looked into the face of the great angel. The poets call it perfection. They are wrong. Perfection is static, dead. His face was a storm. His eyes were the color of molten gold, but behind the brilliance there was a hollowness, a profound, aching exhaustion that seemed to age him by 10,000 years in a single blink. He looked at me, and I felt a sudden, terrifying sensation of being watched from the future. "The truth is a dangerous thing to hunt, little remembrancer," he whispered, stepping closer. The air around him smelled of ozone and crushed lilies. Most men want a legend. They want to believe that the light they see in the sky is a star, when in reality it is a world on fire. You have been sent to chronicle my sons, to record the paragon of the Imperium. But tell me, when you look at a statue, do you see the marble or do you see the cracks? I found my courage, though it felt thin. I see both, my lord. Without the cracks, the statue is just a rock. A small, sad smile touched his lips, a gesture that felt like a secret shared between two people standing on the edge of a cliff. He reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder, and for a moment the golden light in the room seemed to flicker. The shadows on the wall behind him didn't move with him. They stayed still, elongated and jagged, like claws.
"I have had a vision of you, Marius," he said softly, his gaze drifting past me toward the door. "I saw you sitting in a room of iron, weeping over a stack of parchment that the fire refused to take. I saw you holding a secret that would burn the tongue out of any other man." He looked back at me, and the intensity in his eyes was unbearable. "Do you believe that we are the masters of our own footsteps, or are we merely actors reciting a script written by a cruel and silent playwright?" I couldn't answer. The weight of his presence was pressing the air from my lungs. He turned back to the viewport, the warp fire reflecting in his eyes. "Go to your quarters, Marius. Sleep while you still can. Tomorrow we bring compliance to a world called Threnody. I will show you how we save a people by destroying their history. And perhaps in the blood of the fallen, you will begin to see the script I am forced to follow." As I backed out of the room, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the marble floor where he had been standing, there were tiny flecks of red, not from an enemy. He had been clenching his fists so hard that his own nails had punctured his palms, and he hadn't even noticed the blood.
The compliance of Threnody was not a war, it was an execution directed by a conductor who already knew every note of the symphony. From the observation deck of a Stormbird, I watched the descent of the 9th Legion. They didn't drop like soldiers, they fell like a rain of rubies, catching the dying light of Threnodi's sun. At the head of the formation was Sanguinius. To the soldiers of the Imperial Army, he was a god on wing, a promise of salvation. To me, after our midnight talk, he looked like a man throwing himself into a fire because he knew he couldn't move his feet in any other direction. The Threnodonians were a proud people, their cities built of iridescent glass and song-conductive alloy. They refused the Emperor's light not out of malice, but out of a tragic, stubborn love for their own independence. I watched Sanguinius dive into the heart of their capital. His sword, the blade and carmine, didn't just strike, it flowed. He moved with a speed that defied the biological limits of even a Primarch. But there was a strange, haunting rhythm to his slaughter. He would pivot a fraction of a second before a hidden turret opened fire. He would duck before a blade was even drawn. He wasn't reacting to his enemies. He was waiting for them to catch up to the destiny he had already seen. By the time I reached the surface, the song cities were screaming. The glass streets were slick with a mixture of coolant and blood. I found the Primarch in the wreckage of a great library. He was standing over the body of a Threnodonian high priest, a man who had tried to parley only after his world was broken. Sanguinius was silent, his wings stained with the soot of the burning city. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a man who had just finished a tedious, soul-crushing chore. "You knew he would hide a needle pistol in his sleeve, didn't you?" I asked, my voice trembling as I stepped over the crystalline debris. I had seen it from a distance, the priest reaching, Sanguinius decapitating him before the weapon was even clear of the fabric. Sanguinius turned his head slowly. A single drop of blood ran down his cheek, looking like a crimson tear. I knew the weight of the pistol. I knew the specific chemical scent of the poison on the needle. I knew the exact word he would choke on before he died. He stepped toward me, his heavy boots crunching the glass. "I have killed this man 400 times in my mind, Marius. Each time I hoped he might choose peace. Each time he proved my visions right. The tragedy of the future is not that it is hidden, but that it is so horribly, predictably familiar." He beckoned me to follow him into the deeper recesses of the ruined library. Away from the eyes of his sons, the mask of the great angel began to peel away.
We entered a private sanctum where the fires hadn't yet reached. Sanguinius sat on a fallen pillar, his wings drooping, the feathers matted and gray with ash. He whispered, his golden eyes fixed on his stained hands. "My sons think I am a genius of strategy," he whispered. "They think I anticipate the enemy because I am the pinnacle of the Emperor's design. They worship the instinct that keeps them alive. But look at them, Marius. Truly look at them." Through the shattered wall, I saw a squad of blood angels. The Eaters of Hope, they were called in those days. They were moving through the survivors with a ferocity that felt wrong. It wasn't the disciplined efficiency of the Ultramarines. It was a hunger. I saw a warrior, his helmet off, his face contorted in a mask of primal rage, his teeth bared as he stood over a fallen foe. There was a frantic, desperate edge to their violence, as if they were trying to outrun something inside their own veins. "They are beautiful monsters, aren't they?" Sanguinius cracked. "I have seen what they become when the discipline fails. I have seen a future where the gold is stripped away and only the red remains. I see them in my dreams, Marius, not as knights, but as starving ghosts howling my name in a darkness I cannot light." He stood up suddenly, grabbing my tunic with a hand that could have crushed a tank's hull. His grip was frantic. "I need you to write it down. Not the compliance, not the glory. I need you to record the names of the 3 warriors who will die tonight in the clearing of the northern sector. Brother Kale, Sergeant Raxus, and the neophyte Solon. Write them now." "My lord, the northern sector is secure," I stammered, reaching for my data slate. "It is not," he hissed, his eyes wide with a sudden flickering light. "A hidden cell of Threnodonian partisans will detonate a subsonic charge in exactly 22 minutes. My sons will be caught in the blast. I could send a warning, I could change their patrol route, but if I do, the partisans will instead target the refugee camp 3 miles away, killing 4,000 civilians. I have balanced the scales. I have chosen the lives of my sons over the lives of the innocent 10,000 times, and tonight I choose the civilians. I am murdering my own children to save a world that will grow to hate me." He let go of me and walked toward the exit, his wings snapping shut against his back with a sound like a whip crack. He didn't look back as he went to rejoin the slaughter he had personally choreographed. I stood in the ruins, my hands shaking as I wrote those 3 names. 22 minutes later, a dull, thudding vibration shook the earth from the north. I didn't need to wait for the Vox report. I knew. I felt the first true coldness of the crusade then, the realization that I wasn't following a hero. I was following a man who was playing a game of chess against a god, and he was using his own heart as the board.
The years that followed the conquest of Threnody were not measured in months or solar cycles, but in the growing weight of the journals I carried. My quarters aboard the Red Tier had become a tomb of forbidden knowledge. While the rest of the galaxy celebrated the expansion of the Imperium, I sat in the dim light of a single lumen globe, transcribing the whispers of a dying god. Sanguinius had given me a task that was slowly eroding my soul. I was to be the cartographer of his despair. He called it the Angel's Agony, a secret history of the Great Crusade that would never see the light of an imperial library. One evening, as we drifted through the velvet dark of the Ghoul Stars, the Primarch summoned me to the Apothecarian. It was a place of sterile smells and humming machinery, but in the deepest sublevel, the air felt thick and metallic. Sanguinius stood over a stasis pod, his wings tightly furled, looking like a vulture carved from marble. Inside the pod lay a warrior of the 9th, his face hidden by a locked helm, but the sounds coming from the speaker grill were not human.
It was a wet, rhythmic scratching, punctuated by a low, guttural growl that sounded like a predator tasting its own hunger. "His name was Arvain," Sanguinius whispered, not looking at me. "He was a poet on Ball Secundus. He could recite the lays of the ancient earth by heart. Now he only knows one word, and that word is blood." He turned to me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that wasn't sorrow. It was terror. "The flaw is accelerating, Marius. The visions are no longer just images of the future. They are bleeding into the present. I look at my sons, and I see them as they are now, noble, loyal, shining, but I also see the shadow selves that walk behind them. I see Arvain, 1,000 times over, tearing the throats from the people we have sworn to protect. This is the truth beneath the gold. This is the rot in the foundation." He reached out and touched the glass of the stasis pod. The thing inside slammed against the reinforced surface, leaving a smear of red ichor. I asked the Emperor for a cure. I went to him on my knees before the triumph at Ullanor. He looked at me with those eyes of absolute fire and told me that every masterpiece requires a sacrifice. He knew, Marius. He has always known that my sons were born to be broken. He didn't create a legion. He created a timed fuse. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger. The War Master had arrived, the Horus Lupercal, the brightest star, the first among equals. The air in the ship seemed to change instantly, a surge of adrenaline and pride rippling through the crew. Sanguinius adjusted his robes, the mask of the great angel snapping back into place with a terrifying, practiced ease. "Come," he said, "the theater begins again. You must record the embrace of the brothers." The meeting on the observation deck was a spectacle of impossible radiance. Horus was a titan of bronze and black, radiating a charisma so potent it felt like physical heat. When Sanguinius saw him, he laughed, a sound of genuine brotherly joy, and folded the angel into a massive embrace. To the hundreds of officers and remembrancers watching, it was the pinnacle of the Crusade's unity. But I was standing close enough to see Sanguinius's eyes. As Horus pulled away, his hands resting on Sanguinius's shoulders, the angel's wings twitched, a spray of white down falling to the deck. Sanguinius was looking at his brother, but he wasn't seeing the War Master. His pupils had dilated until his eyes were solid pits of gold. I saw his reflection in the polished marble floor, and for a split second the reflection shifted. I didn't see Horus. I saw a mountain of black plate, wreathed in a sickening purple fire, holding a mace that dripped with the lifeblood of a world. "You look tired, brother," Horus said, his voice a rich, comforting baritone. "The crusade is almost won. Soon we shall rest in the gardens of Terra and watch the sun rise on a galaxy at peace." Sanguinius smiled, and it was the most heartbreaking thing I have ever witnessed. "I see the sunrise you speak of, Horus. It is unforgettable." Later that night, Sanguinius came to my chambers. He didn't knock, he simply appeared in the doorway, a shadow among shadows. He handed me a small obsidian cylinder, a data crypt sealed with a biometric lock that responded only to the touch of a Primarch. "If I die before the end," he said, his voice barely a breath, "you must take this to the world called Cygnus Prime. Do not open it. Do not let the Inquisition see it. There is a name inside, a name of a brother who has already fallen, but whose heart still beats with loyalty. He is the only one who can stop the black rage from consuming the galaxy." "Who, my lord?" I asked, clutching the cylinder to my chest. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. The ozone was gone, replaced by the scent of ancient, dried blood. The one they call the Forgotten, the one whose statue is empty. He is not dead, Marius. He is waiting in the dark, and he is hungry for the same thing my sons crave. He left without another word, leaving me alone with the weight of a secret that felt like a cold blade against my ribs. I looked at the journals on my desk, the record of an angel's slow descent into madness, and I realized that the Great Crusade wasn't a war for the future. It was a funeral procession for a species that didn't yet know it was already dead.
The galaxy did not break all at once. It splintered in the dark, one silent betrayal at a time, until the echoes reached us in the Cygnus cluster. By then, the red tear no longer felt like a cathedral of hope. It felt like a floating cage. The air within the ship had grown heavy, saturated with a copper tang that no atmospheric scrubber could remove. It was the scent of the Legion's soul beginning to boil. I spent my days hunched over my desk, the obsidian cylinder Sanguinius had given me, tucked into a secret compartment in my floorboards. It hummed at night, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to synchronize with the beating of my own frantic heart. I was no longer a chronicler of glory. I was a witness to a slow-motion car crash involving gods and stars. Sanguinius had withdrawn into his private sanctum as we neared the Cygnus system, a region of space that felt fundamentally wrong, as if the laws of physics had been rewritten by a madman. When he finally summoned me, I found him in a room I had never entered. It wasn't a library or a strategium, it was an atelier, but the art within was a nightmare. The walls were covered in canvases, thousands of them, depicting the same scene over and over. A golden warrior falling through a black sky, his wings burning, his blood turning into stars. In some, the warrior was Sanguinius. In others, it was his sons, their faces twisted into the bestial masks I had seen in my darkest dreams. "The shadow has caught up to us, Marius," he said, standing in the center of the room, stripped to the waist. His back was a map of scars, and his wings were trembling, shedding burnt feathers like autumn leaves. He held a brush made of silver wire, dipping it not into paint, but into a chalice of his own blood. "Horus has sent us here to die, not just to die in the flesh, but to die in the spirit. He wants to see the angel fall into the red." "We can turn back, my lord," I whispered, though I knew the words were hollow. "The fleet is still ours. We can warn the others." He turned to me, and I recoiled. His eyes were no longer gold. They were a bruised sunset violet, leaking a faint, ethereal smoke. "Turn back to what? To a brother who has already sold his soul to the primordial hunger? To an emperor who sits on a throne built of the very lies I am forced to protect? There is no back, Marius. There is only the descent." He dropped the brush and walked toward me, his movements jagged and uncharacteristically clumsy. "Cygnus Prime is not a battlefield. It is a mirror. It will show my sons the truth of their nature, and I fear that once they see it, they will never want to look away again." As we entered the system, the voxcasters throughout the ship began to weep. It wasn't a metaphor. A thick, translucent fluid began to leak from the grills, carrying the sound of a billion voices screaming in a language that didn't exist. On the lower decks, the first outbreaks of the red thirst began to manifest. These weren't the controlled bursts of combat aggression I had seen before. This was a total collapse of the psyche.
I watched through a security feed as a squad of veterans, heroes of a dozen compliances, fell upon a group of serfs in the mess hall. They didn't use their blades, they used their teeth. And as they fed, they didn't look like monsters, they looked like children finally getting what they had been promised for a lifetime. Sanguinius knew. He felt every throat torn, every drop of blood spilled on his ship. He stood on the bridge as we approached the primary planet of Cygnus Prime, his presence the only thing holding the Legion back from a total descent into madness. But the cost was visible. His skin had become translucent, like fine porcelain ready to shatter. He looked at the main view screen, where the planet Cygnus Prime hung like a rotting fruit in the void, wreathed in psychic storms that looked like tattered wings. "Sanguinius," he called out, his voice a ghost of its former self. I stepped forward, sensing the end of an era. "The cylinder. Do you still have it?" "Yes, my lord. When the sky turns black and the ground begins to scream, you must break the seal. Not before, not after. The name inside is a curse, but in the coming war, we will need curses to fight the darkness." He looked at me then, and for a fleeting second the old warmth returned, the love of a father for a son who is doomed to outlive him. "I am sorry, little remembrancer. I promised you a story of perfection. Instead, I am giving you the front row seat to the end of the world." The ship shuddered violently as we hit the atmospheric fringe. Outside, the stars began to go out, one by one, replaced by a suffocating, oily darkness. On the command deck, the blood angels began to growl, a low collective sound that vibrated in the hull itself. Sanguinius drew his sword, and for the first time, the blade didn't shine with light. It smoked with a dark, hungry shadow. He looked at me, a silent command in his eyes to stay behind, to survive, to keep the secret. Then, with a roar that was half angel and half beast, he led his sons into the maw of the trap. I stood alone on the bridge as the first demons began to manifest from the shadows of the vents, realizing that the great angel wasn't going down to save his sons. He was going down to find out if he was the monster he feared he was.
The sky above the imperial palace didn't look like a sky anymore. It looked like a bruised throat, choked by the smoke of 100,000 burning cities. We were no longer in the realm of logic or strategy. We were in the endgame of a cosmic horror story. And I, Marius Lauren, was the only one left to count the heartbeats of the dying. The siege of Terra had ground the world into a red dust, and through that dust, I saw the angel one last time. Sanguinius stood upon the walls of the ultimate gate, his wings no longer white, but stained a permanent rusted iron red. He wasn't fighting like a general, he was fighting like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. Every time he swung his sword, he was weeping. I could hear it over the vox, a soft, rhythmic sobbing that punctuated the roar of bolter fire. He wasn't crying for the dead. He was crying because he could see the exact second each of his sons would fall. He was living their deaths before they happened, 1,000 synchronized tragedies playing out in his mind, while his hands performed the mechanical work of slaughter. On the final night, before the Emperor called for the boarding of the vengeful spirit, Sanguinius found me in the bowels of the Sanctum Imperialis. I was surrounded by my journals, my hands stained black with ink and gray with ash. I looked at the obsidian cylinder he had given me months ago, the one that's supposed to contain the name of the forgotten brother, the secret cure for the red thirst.
"It is time, Marius," his voice said. His voice was no longer a bell. It was the sound of dry leaves skittering over a grave. He looked diminished, his plate cracked, his wings dragging on the cold stone floor. "The path leads to the ship. My brother waits for me in the center of the web. The script is finished. Only the performance remains." "My lord, the cylinder," I whispered, my voice cracking. "The sky is gone, my lord. There is only fire." He looked at the obsidian tube in my shaking hands. A look of such profound, agonizing pity crossed his face that I felt my heart physically seize. "Do you know why I gave it to you, Marius? Not because it contained a savior. I gave it to you to see if hope could survive in the presence of absolute certainty. I wanted to see if even a man who knew the end would still try to change the middle." "I don't understand," I sobbed. "Break it," he commanded. I twisted the seal. The obsidian shattered, but there was no data slate inside. There was no secret name. Only a small, jagged fragment of a mirror and a single scrap of parchment written in a hand that looked suspiciously like the Emperor's own. I held the glass up, and for a moment I didn't see my own reflection. I saw Sanguinius, but he was draped in the black armor of the War Master, his eyes burning with the same purple fire that had consumed Horus. I looked at the parchment. It contained only 5 words. "The flaw is the goal." Sanguinius leaned down, his cold golden breath ghosting over my ear. "The Emperor didn't fail when he made us, Marius. He succeeded. My sons were never meant to be the guardians of humanity. We were meant to be the vultures that cleaned the bones of a galaxy that was never supposed to survive the crusade. The Black Rage isn't a disease, it's a harvest. When I die tonight, my scream will not just break my sons, it will ignite a fire in their blood that will keep the Imperium alive for 10,000 years of hatred. Without my death, there is no faith. Without my tragedy, there is only logic, and logic cannot win this war." He stood up, his wings snapping open with a sound like a thunderclap. The brilliance he radiated was so intense that it began to blister my skin. "The forgotten brother didn't die because he was weak, Marius. He died because he refused to play his part in the slaughterhouse. I am the better son. I will go to my death, and I will do it with a smile, because I am the ultimate weapon of a father who loves his species more than his children." He turned and walked toward the teleportation chambers, his silhouette etched in the fire of the burning palace. That was the last time any mortal man saw the angel alive. Hours later, the sky didn't just scream, it tore. A psychic shockwave hit the palace so hard that the marble turned to liquid. I felt Sanguinius die. It wasn't a fade, it was a violent, jagged snap that echoed in the marrow of my bones. And then came the sound. From every corner of the palace, from every trench and every rampart, the blood angels began to howl. It wasn't a war cry. It was the sound of 1,000,000 hearts breaking simultaneously, followed by a wet, tearing noise as the nobility was ripped out of them. They fell upon the traitors and the loyalists alike, their eyes weeping blood, their mouths screaming for a father who had just sold them to eternity. I am old now. I sit in a cell beneath the ruins of a world that no longer has a name. I have been kept alive by machines I do not understand, for a purpose I dread to contemplate. My eyes were taken long ago, replaced by lenses that record every second of the darkness. I have filled 10,000 more journals, but I no longer use ink. I use the fluid that leaks from the walls of this tomb. Sometimes, in the silence between the screams of the galaxy, I hear a tapping on the door of my vault. It is a rhythmic, gentle sound, like the brushing of feathers against a cold iron gate. And a voice, sounding so much like the angels, whispers through the keyhole. "Are you still recording, Marius? The play is only just beginning. The 10,000 years were just the prologue. Would you like to see what happens when the vultures finally run out of bones?" I reach for my pen. My hands are shaking, because I know that if I open that door, the reflection in the mirror will finally be mine.